All right, so he is fastly becoming one of our favorite guests to bring on, even though we've only had him on once. He made me laugh for 20 minutes, and he's running for state senate against Mr. Needleman, our good pal, Brendan Saunders. How are you, buddy? How's it going over there by the, what is it, the Connecticut River, right? Up by the Connecticut River?
Correct.
Yeah, I get my geography kind of mixed up.
Good morning, Lee. Thank you for having me on. My world has been rocked recently.
Yeah.
I recently learned that I ain't black. So I'm dealing with this. I know there's other things going on in the world, but this is very personal for me. I'm dealing with it. There is a chance, however, there may be a silver lining because maybe I is black. And so I'm having my people look into it because if that's the case, if I is black, then we're okay. But,
oh, man. So obviously you're referring to what the presidential candidate Joe Biden had to say about whether or not you should vote for him. And, I said, I sent you a message last night. If you're not black, then you've got a hell of a tan. Let's put it that way. One or the other. So,
I have been the envy of my friends for many years with this tan I have.
Oh, man. All right. So, listen, we could get into that a little bit. How does that make you feel? I mean, when somebody says that, it seems like the left can sort of pander at times and nobody seems to mind. But if it were to happen on the right, it's chaos, right?
That's very correct. I thought my mother has this phrase. I'm sure you've heard it. It's par for the course. Just look at who said it. To me, I think what's important. It isn't just pandering, but I think what's important is that, and I mean this from the top. And what it is it illustrates the condescension of the Democrat Party. And I mean this at the top. I have plenty of friends who are Democrats who don't feel this way. But to me, when you get to the leadership levels of the Democrat Party, there's this condescension, and let's call it exactly what it is. It's a plantation mentality. It's basically the idea that y'all should be happy about the way we treat you, right? And so it's just assumed you're going to vote for me, and I'm upset if you don't. What it infers is that you couldn't make it without me. So why wouldn't you vote for me? Because I'm the one who takes care of you.
Interesting.
And so it is what you said that if somebody on the right did this, they would be so called out for this. Even listen, I'm going to take it a step further because not too long after he said that, even Michelle Obama came out and said, well, yes, black people should be voting for him more. And again, I imagine what would happen if, say, back in the day, Condoleezza Rice or Colin Powell had said, yes, black people should be voting Republican and should be voting for George Bush. They'd be called house Negroes. That's
right.
The term that would be used, right? But because this is the Democrats, the media, finds ways to just gloss over it and move on. Nothing to see here. Just crazy Joe being crazy,
right.
And we move on. But for folks like myself, to me, it's great. It's a great revealing moment. It's a great illustration of how they really think about you at the top levels of this party.
Brendan Saunders is our guest state Senate candidate. And again, more information on you. Where do they go as far as finding out? You got a website yet?
Saunders for Senate. Saunders, Saunders, the number 4, Senate.com.
Okay, so I want to just expound upon as far as the perception of the Democrat Party really quick with folks of color across the country. So right now we're right in the middle of maybe one of the most chaotic times. In my life, it's the most chaotic that I can remember. I turn on the television and I actually feel uneasy. I feel nervous for the nation as I watch, these nations burn, or the cities burn literally burning to the ground. So if in the last 50 years, supposedly people of color have been voting in droves for Democrats and they're not happy with their financial plight, their entire plight, and they're voting consistently Democratic, why wouldn't folks of color decide, wait a second, this just doesn't work? Why don't we sort of jump ship and try something different?
What generally happens actually when a black person is upset and doesn't feel that their party is reaching them is that they just sit it out. And I think that's one of the things that has surprised, for instance, even Hillary Clinton. Yes, Democrats generally are going to get more than 50% of the African-American vote, but the African-American vote will fluctuate year by year. And what brought Barack Obama through 2 elections was not only that he got 90% of the African-American vote, but that the African-American vote was high. It was extremely high. We came out early and often for Barack Obama. And so that's actually generally what tends to happen, is that they will sit back. In fact, what's kind of interesting is the radio show that Joe Biden was on when he made those remarks. The host of that show is very vocal about, I don't like either of the parties, and I want to get rid of them all. I want to scrap, and that's a bigger sentiment today, especially by younger African Americans, is that coincidentally they don't like the 2-party system because they don't feel like they get representation in either one. So I'm kind of looked at, especially among younger African Americans, I'm kind of looked at as the old guy who says, well, I'm going to choose one. These are the 2 power structures. I'm going to choose one, and I'm going to choose the one that best represents my ideals, versus trying to choose one that I think is going to give me the most, or just sitting it out and saying, screw the whole system.
I've been saying that for a long time. I'm glad you brought that up. The 2-party system, it doesn't do it for me. And I get on the radio, I talk about it every single day. Certainly, I have much more inclined, I guess, or in line with people who would have an R by their name as far as philosophies, et cetera. Like, I want people to go out and be able to have the freedoms to do what they want to do, and sort of that is more in line, I think, with the Republicans as it would be as opposed to the Democrats who want to be more of a nanny state. But both of the parties are ripe with waste, fraud, and abuse, Brandon. You know what I mean? It's like
exactly.
It's not like we're giving out stars to the Republican Party for such a great job, because they really haven't done that. So I've been saying for the longest time that somehow, some way, somebody is going to have to come through and sort of change the political system. Either a third party, or revamping one of the parties to make it more honest. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's not one of those things. I'm not sure I'm going to see it in my lifetime. I have supported third parties in my past. I mean, some may remember Tom Scott back in the day. He was a third party candidate who ran for governor back when John Rowland won. And I actually supported him that year. And so there have been times when I was younger when I would think in terms of a third party, because I go back to what I shared with you the first time I was on. My parents were always about the individual. Doesn't matter what letters in front of their name. Look at the individual, investigate them, do your research on them, and figure out who you believe is going to be the best. And so. But like I said, I'm older now, and maybe I'm part of the problem because I don't believe it can happen anymore. But I do wish that there was, and it doesn't even have to be a third party. How about a fourth and a fifth party? How about legitimate? Just like you said, even on the right hand side, you have Republicans, but you also have libertarians, and then you have middle of the road folks on both sides of the parties. And then, so there could actually potentially be room for 3 or 4 different parties. Yeah. But have fun trying to wrestle power out of the two.
Oh yeah. Well, nothing bothers me more, I think, than when you got these issues where you got a free thinker who has maybe an outside the box idea, has to be tethered to one of the parties because they're commanding that they vote a certain way on an issue. Otherwise, they don't get something for their. I hate that. I know that's politics. That's politics 101. Yep. But I just people giving up their ideals and giving up some of their character to go along and get along. That never sits well with me. I don't feel like you're one of those. So that's why I like talking to you, and I appreciate you coming on. I got to get to some of these what's going on riot wise and get your sort of impression of this. You watch this unfold on the evening news. What's it make you feel like?
You said there's something going on? Did I miss something?
Well, just yeah. Well, I guess maybe it's a few things are happening around the country.
I will say this: I wrote an op-ed for the Connecticut Examiner. So if you Google CT Examiner, Brendan Saunders, they published it over the weekend, and I very much appreciate it. I don't believe that rioting is the solution, and it's sad that at this point, a lot of this has largely been taken over by the rent-a-mob organizations, the Antifas, and those organizations. There are good people. There are good, well-meaning people. Some of them are my relatives who have already participated in different things throughout the weekend that were peaceful, and they were peaceful, and there was no intention of robbing, rioting, or looting, and that's great. But unfortunately, there are groups that are ready to pounce on this and turn it into craziness as it has. I wish that Trump would tackle this issue of so in my op-ed, what I share is that what we saw was abuse of power, and I hate abuse of power. And I wish that Trump would actually tackle this, if for no other reason than to tick a lot of people off, that he would be the one to tackle it.
Right.
But I would love to see him do something like create a task force and bring law enforcement and community leaders, to the White House, and let's come up with some actionable steps that we can use to weed out corruption. Right. I've heard you already say it this morning, and I can attest to it as well, that I know cops who are good, and I know that good cops hate bad cops. But I also know that every good cop that I've talked to about this situation has said that there's many ways in which their hands are tied inside the system. I actually know a good cop who did buck the system and expose the corruption, and he lost his job for it. So right. I would love to see this handled at the national level, where we come up with actionable steps to weed out corruption, and that we install preventative measures. Yeah,
I just think that this whole scenario has, and I use the word bogarted by, I don't know if you want to call them Antifa, or you want to call them this, whatever the left-leaning groups. They've taken the narrative of this very solemn, come-together sort of moment in the country, and they've broken it to pieces. They smashed it. Because, like I said, on Friday, I left here with amazing humility, sadness. I felt bad. I'm like, this is terrible. This poor guy, blah, blah, blah. And this is clearly a representation of police overstepping their bounds. And then I come back here on Monday and I'm ticked off because I watched entire cities, burn. And for what? What's the
right.
Why are you burning some poor man who worked his entire life to own a convenience store? You're burning it to the ground. Why are you looting, stealing 1,000 pairs of sneakers, or breaking and ripping apart a Target or an AutoZone? What does that prove?
Right, and I don't believe that the justification, that things that are said, well, we don't own property, it isn't our property anyways, and now as you have things taken from you, you see how we feel and all that. That isn't proper justification for an immoral act. As my mother used to say, two wrongs don't make a right. On the other hand, I do, as I said, I understand the anger. As we went into the weekend, and as I was penning the op-ed that I penned towards the end of last week, those who were my black friends and relatives were angry, frustrated, and I wasn't sure where white people were. And I was actually encouraged, I believe it was on Friday morning, that as I looked at my Facebook timeline, that I saw white people were brokenhearted over this. And I was like, wow, that meant a lot to me, to say, here's a moment where they understand that this is wrong, that this is just wrong. Now, I think it was your last guest who talked about, in terms of, okay, so it was an incident, and how did it get to this? How it got to this is because if you're a black person, you've lived this your whole life. Even myself, having grown up here on the Connecticut shoreline, from the minute I turned 16, I dealt with issues getting pulled over. Somehow I always fit the description. Didn't matter what happened. If a crime happened in the area and I was driving through, I fit the description and was pulled over and was searched and checked out. So there's a personal aspect in which you've lived through it personally. But I got to be honest. I got to bring this up. On the national level, there have been what I would consider peaceful expressions to try to bring awareness of this as an ongoing thing, and it has felt from Black people like those have been ignored. And one of the probably the two best examples are also the two examples that I know are going to make every white person cringe when I say this. But let's start with Colin Kaepernick. Whatever you thought of the way he chose to express his emotion, understand that what he did got bogarted, as you said. Because what he did, he made clear from the very beginning, is that I'm simply kneeling to say that, to raise awareness of the fact that Black men are being hurt a lot by the governing authorities. And specifically, this is what he was pointing at, was bad police killing Black men, right? But that's not what we heard. That's not what the narrative became. It became he's not patriotic. He's anti-America. How dare he desecrate the flag? How dare he trample over the men who have fought for his freedom? And none of that was actually what he was about. He even shared from the very beginning, he'd been doing it before it came to national attention. And he even shared that he had spoken with folks from the military and asked them, hey, what's something that I can do that will not dishonor you guys and what you have done, but that will bring attention to this? And they were the ones who gave him the idea that there are times in the military when we kneel in honor instead of standing in honor. And so if you're a Black person and you see something like that where he becomes public enemy number one and the narrative gets totally switched from what it originally meant, and now something like this happens, you're going, gee, I think that we were trying to tell you about this a while ago and we tried to do it in peaceful ways and you didn't want to listen, and now here it is where you cannot help but see what's happening. And by the way, we're now really angry that this is where it had to come to.
Well, we can have that discussion about Kaepernick next time you're in here in the studio, because I understand where you're going with that. I just feel like the overwhelming number of military personnel would disagree with the fact that taking a knee during the national anthem is the right way to go. And you know what? And I think with technology and with cell phones, we are seeing more and more of what the Black community has said for a couple of decades, that they are in some cases under attack. And go ahead.
And that is certainly the other point, is that more and more of these videos keep surfacing, and that's what I deal with in my op-ed. And by the way, I completely understand if veterans and those who serve are do not like how Kaepernick expressed himself. I hear you, man. I would never try to minimize that. The point I'm making is that it was a peaceful way of trying to bring attention to something, right?
Gotcha.
That's the only point that I'm trying to make in that. So now instead there's a non-peaceful way of that point bubbling over at this point.
All right, Brennan, listen, I got to go because it's almost 8:30, but one more time, give your website. Folks can learn more about you.
Sure. Saunders for Senate. That's the number 4. So Saunders, SAUNDERS, the number 4, Senate.com. Please have me back. I want to talk about this some more.
I want to get you back in the studio, so we'll do that now that, sort of the COVID panic. I guess that doesn't exist anymore. Did you know that COVID's gone?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Hey, do you have 10 seconds or 30 seconds for me to say one thing? Because I have a supporter of my campaign, and she's a white woman, and she was asked, she forwarded my op-ed, and she was asked, hey, what can we do? This is a white woman with this answer, and I think it's so beautiful. She said there's lots we can do. We must first acknowledge that systemic oppression, injustice, and inequities exist in our country. The fact is experiences and opportunities are different based on race, gender, sexual orientation, and ethnicity. The Constitution guarantees freedom and civil liberties for all, but then we must speak out when something is said or observed around us. We must also get involved in our communities and at the state level to create policies and practices that are just and equitable. That's one reason why I ran for my local Board of Ed. All organizational systems can come together to advocate and demand change. It isn't even about politics, it's about humanity. That's a beautiful white woman who's a supporter of my campaign and speaking to other white people. And it's beautiful.
Well said, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it. And that, I appreciate the fact that you came on, and we'll get you on here in the studio and we'll go face to face, take some phone calls from some people out there. So our people will talk to your people. How's that?
Hey, sounds good.
All right. Thank you, sir. Have a good one. Again, State Senate candidate Brandon Saunders, one of my new favorites. I enjoy talking to him a lot. So we'll come right back.